Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into a world of blinding gold, wind-swept deserts, and camel caravans so massive they make modern traffic look like child's play. Picture this. The sun sets over an ocean of dunes, and you're perched on the edge of the Sahara, the air dry as chalk, the sky bleeding orange. Somewhere far beyond those golden sands, a king is preparing to shake the world. Not with war, not with conquest, but with generosity so wild, it will literally wreck an economy. You'll meet a man who's so rich, so ridiculously rich, that he goes down in history not just for having wealth, but for what he does with it. But I warn you, this journey isn't all comfy cushions and gold coins. There will be sand in your socks, sore feet, and some very sketchy desert toilets. You probably won't survive this, but it'll be worth it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love knowing where my bedtime crew is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in West Africa, sometime around the late 1200s, give or take. The heat wraps around you like a heavy blanket, not the comfy kind, more like the help 'em slow roasting kind. The Sahel is buzzing with life in its own quiet way. Herds of cattle graze lazily, kids chase each other through dusty courtyards, and the smell of fried millet wafts through the air. But if you squint far off toward the horizon, past the rivers and baobab trees, you'll see it, a kingdom humming with power, ambition, and yes, a lot of gold. This is the Mali Empire. It's not just a country, it's a vibe. Think wide trade routes stretching like veins across the continent, pulsing with salt, ivory, cloth, and horses. At its peak, Mali controls almost half of West Africa's gold. Yeah, half. That's not a flex, it's a full-on muscle cramp of wealth. You're looking at an empire so influential that its riches ripple out all the way to Venice, Cairo, and even China. And yet, its foundations are surprisingly humble. The empire doesn't begin with Mansa Musa. Not even close. You gotta scroll back a few generations to Sundiata Keita, the original founder, kind of like the Steve Jobs of Mali. Sundiata's story is its own epic bedtime ride. He's the stuff of legends, a once-disabled child who becomes a warrior king after defeating the powerful Sasso ruler, Semanguru Kante. The story has witches, spirit animals, and a level of poetic justice that makes Disney villains blush. But we'll leave Sundiata in his rightful saga tonight. You, meanwhile, are trailing through Mali's heartlands. The capital, Niamey, might not sound as glamorous as, say, Babylon or Rome, but it's the engine room of the empire. It's a place of red clay walls, ornate mosques, vibrant markets, and rhythmic drums that echo across the plains at night. The Niger River snakes nearby like a lazy blue dragon, carrying canoes filled with goods and gossip between trading posts. By this time, Mali has become the place in West Africa. Gold is everywhere, melted into jewelry, stacked in storerooms, lining the hems of royal robes. But don't get distracted by the glitter. What's more important is how the wealth is handled. The Malians aren't hoarders. They're builders, educators, planners. And they've created a system so tight it makes Roman accountants nod in respect. Historians still argue whether Mali's centralized government was as tight as it seemed or more of a patchwork of tribute-paying provinces. But what's clear is this: it works. The empire thrives. At its helm, there's a rotating cast of rulers, some more competent than others. One of them, Mansa Musa II, is either really brave or really bored, depending on how you see it. See, Abubakari becomes obsessed with what lies beyond the Atlantic Ocean. Rumor has it he builds a literal fleet of ships. Yes, ships in the 1300s, and sets off west, hoping to discover new lands. Bold move. Some say he never returns. Others whisper that he landed somewhere in the Americas long before Columbus ever sniffed a compass. Quirky? Absolutely. Confirmed? Nope. Historians still argue whether Abubakari's voyage even happened at all. But hey, wouldn't that be something? His disappearance is more than just a footnote, though. It changes everything. Because when Abubakari leaves, he places his little brother, our star of the night, Musa Keita, in charge. And just like that, a placeholder becomes a king. Imagine being a temp at a corporate office and suddenly finding yourself CEO. That's Musa's vibe at first. He's not exactly planning to rule. But sometimes history doesn't care what you planned. It hands you a crown and says, "Good luck, kid." You, dear listener, are now walking beside this accidental monarch. The young Musa inherits a kingdom that's massive, wealthy, and, crucially, stable. But don't mistake his humility for weakness. There's steel in his spine, ambition in his gaze. He doesn't want to just keep Mali running. He wants to make it unforgettable. And this is where the bedtime story starts to shimmer. Because while some rulers throw lavish feasts or build pointless statues of themselves with oddly large noses, Musa dreams bigger. He dreams of Mecca, of faith, of legacy, of a pilgrimage so massive, so jaw-droppingly golden, that it'll echo through centuries. But we're not there yet. Right now, you're still in Niani. The air smells of leather and incense. Artisans hammer away at bronze. Tailors stitch cotton tunics. And griots, the storytellers, chant under the stars. Children toss pebbles in the dust while elders sip baobab tea and argue over how many camels make a proper dowry. And somewhere, in the royal court, Musa is watching, listening, learning. He studies the tax system. Yes, there's one. He watches trade caravans roll in, loaded with salt from the Sahara and fabric from North Africa. He listens to scholars discuss astronomy and Islamic law. He prays, he fasts, and slowly, quietly, he builds a vision that reaches far beyond the borders of Mali. Musa isn't flashy, at least, not yet. He's calculated, like that guy in your group project who doesn't say much until he drops a presentation that melts everyone's brain. And here's a fun tidbit. In Musa's Mali, libraries are hot, like prestige-level hot. Books are not just dusty shells of knowledge. They're social currency. You bring a rare manuscript in a town, and boom, you're instantly cooler than a TikTok trend. Some sources even claim books are worth more than gold. Let that sink in. As the 1300s settle in like a warm evening breeze, Mali stands strong. You can feel the beat of the empire under your feet, steady and full of potential. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of a candlelit chamber, Musa Keita starts dreaming of roads that stretch to Mecca and beyond. But we'll get to the gold-laden pilgrimage soon. For now, lean back, breathe deep, and imagine the weight of that crown resting gently against the young ruler's brow. The world has no idea what's coming, but you do, because you're already walking in his footsteps. You blink, and the world moves forward. Now, the young Mansa Musa is no longer just observing. He's ruling. And yes, it's a little awkward at first. You don't go from crownless to king without stepping on a few ceremonial robes. But Musa has something many rulers lack: patience. He doesn't storm into the palace waving reforms around like parade flags. Instead, he walks slowly, speaks softly, and listens like his ears are gold detectors. He knows Mali is already strong. The economy is humming, trade is flowing, and the nobles aren't plotting against each other, at least not before breakfast. But there's one problem. Mali is still mostly invisible to the wider world. Like a genius student sitting in the back row, Musa's empire has the answers, but no one's calling on it. So, he sets out to change that. But first, let's zoom in on daily life in Musa's empire. You're wandering through Niani again, this time with a sharper eye. Merchants crowd the markets, selling dyed fabrics, spices, salt blocks, and, you guessed it, gold nuggets the size of chicken eggs. Some are tumbled smooth like river pebbles, others jagged and raw, fresh from Mali's mines at Bambuk and Bure. There's no mistaking it. This place is dripping with wealth. And yet, the people are not lounging on silk pillows all day. Mali is not a playground for the idle rich. Farmers plant millet with rough hands, smiths clang hammers into swords and stirrups, and teachers in Quranic schools discipline students with gentle scoldings and stern eyebrows. This is a working society, and Musa respects that. He starts by investing in what Mali already does well: trade. Caravans stretch from here to North Africa, weaving through the Sahara like great beasts of burden. Camels carry not just gold and salt, but ideas, Islamic teachings, architectural designs, astronomical charts. The desert may look empty, but it's alive with knowledge. Musa doesn't just tolerate this intellectual cargo, he cultivates it. He invites scholars, scribes, and teachers into his court. Some come from as far as Cairo or Andalusia. You watch as an old scholar with a frizzled beard lays out a map of the stars, while Musa leans in, eyes gleaming. This isn't just a king, it's a student on a mission. And then, one night, under a sky blotted with stars, it hits him. He's a Muslim king, a devout one, and yet, he's never made the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca that all Muslims, if able, are called to complete at least once in their lives. It's more than a journey. It's a declaration, a bridge between the personal and the divine, between your small life and the vast world of believers. So Musa decides, he'll go. But here's the twist. He's not going alone. You've probably packed for a road trip before. Toothbrush, charger, snacks. Now imagine packing for a 4,000-mile camelback expedition across hostile desert terrain, through multiple empires, with a full entourage of nobles, soldiers, slaves, scholars, cooks, singers, and architects. Also, brings several tons of gold, just in case. Historians still argue whether Musa took 10,000 people with him or closer to 60,000. Either way, it's bananas. You don't just go to Mecca when you're Musa. You move in style. This is not a pilgrimage. It's a slow-motion golden comet crossing the earth. You saddle up next to him as the caravan begins to roll out of Niani. Dust curls around the camel's feet. Women in flowing indigo robes sing farewell songs. The sun rises like a burning coin over the savannah. And just like that, the most legendary road trip in medieval history begins. The caravan creeps north, snaking its way toward the Sahara. The heat becomes your new enemy. It doesn't slap you. It seeps into your bones. Days stretch endlessly, and nights are short, scratchy affairs filled with scorpions and prayers whispered into the dry wind. You try to sleep under the stars, but the camels won't stop groaning. And then you reach the salt mines of Tagaza. Picture this. A town made entirely of salt blocks. Seriously. Salt walls, salt roofs, salt benches. Lick the wrong building, and it might disappear. The workers here live harsh lives, cutting thick slabs from the desert floor, stacking them like bricks, and shipping them southward. Musa watches them work and nods in approval. Salt is gold's quiet cousin. Unflashy, but essential. Without salt, your body collapses. Your empire stumbles. Your camels throw dramatic fits. Musa purchases enormous quantities of salt and distributes coins to the miners. Not too much. He's generous, but not careless. Not yet. Next stop, the fabled city of Walata, where desert traders drink tea that tastes like scorched mint and sell scrolls written in Kufic script. The mosques here lean slightly with age, their adobe towers casting sharp shadows in the midday sun. Musa prays alongside locals, donates gold to the poor, and hires more scholars for his growing intellectual army. Everywhere he goes, people stare, not just at the size of his caravan, but the way he walks, steady, quiet, deliberate. He doesn't shout or boast. He radiates. He's that one guest at a wedding who doesn't talk much, but somehow everyone ends up following around. And still, the road stretches on. You reach the edges of the Sahara, where the sand sings when the wind pushes right. And then, finally, the caravan rolls into the lush north, into Cairo. Cairo. It's 1324. The Mamluk Sultanate rules this dazzling city. And let me tell you, it's not used to being impressed. Cairo is the world's crossroads. Merchants from India, Europe, Arabia, they're all here. Towering minarets poke the sky, and the streets hum with gossip, goats, and the smell of honeyed bread. But when Musa arrives, Cairo pauses. Picture gold-draped camels trotting through dusty boulevards, slaves carrying staffs of ivory, nobles tossing coins to crowds just because they can. Cairo has seen wealth, but this is mythic. Musa politely requests an audience with the Sultan. And then, awkward pause, someone tells him that protocol requires bowing. Like flat on your face. You are lesser than the Sultan bowing. Musa, being a Muslim, kindly declines. He explains, quite calmly, that he only bows to God. You'd expect tension, but no, the Sultan is charmed. He respects Musa's dignity. They meet. They talk. Gifts are exchanged: gold, textiles, books, and possibly a few jokes about camel flatulence. Historians still argue whether this moment was stiff or warm, formal or oddly friendly. But either way, Musa leaves his mark. He also leaves a ton of gold. Literally. He handed out like candy. To beggars, scholars, officials, shopkeepers. He builds mosques, supports schools, funds charities. In Cairo eats it up. Too much. Because what happens when a city is suddenly flooded with free money? Prices go nuts. Inflation strikes. The Egyptian dinar plummets in value. Local markets get messy. It's like giving every kid at a party 10 pounds of sugar and wondering why everyone's screaming by sunset. Historians still argue whether this was planned or just a byproduct of Musa's ultra-generosity. Either way, it becomes one of the earliest recorded cases of a single individual unintentionally crashing an entire regional economy. Yep, that happened. And Musa? He just keeps moving. The pilgrimage is far from over. You've still got the Red Sea to cross, the Arabian desert to survive, and Mecca to reach. But for now, rest your feet in Cairo. Soak in the chaos. Smell the spices curling through the alleyways. Watch merchants curse gleefully at their new, completely unpredictable price charts. You, my friend, are traveling with a king whose heart is as vast as his wealth. And this story, it's only just heating up. The desert wind howls as your caravan turns eastward, away from Cairo, away from the Nile's lush fingers, away from all that is familiar. The Red Sea glitters in the distance, half a mirror, half a monster. The camels groan. The servants groan. Even the gold seems to groan under its own weight. But Mansa Musa? He is quiet. Something has changed in him. He's no longer just a king on a pilgrimage. He's a man approaching something sacred. Mecca isn't a destination on a map anymore. It's a magnet pulling him forward, reshaping his mind, bending his will toward God. And you start to see it too. The rhythm of the journey is no longer just gold and gossip, salt and splendor. Now it's faith. Each prayer, each sunrise, each humble gesture along the way feels heavier, like the earth is pressing its palm into your chest and asking, "Are you paying attention?" You pass through the Arabian Peninsula, where the air is dry enough to crack your thoughts in half. Towns shrink in size, but grow in spiritual density. In Medina, Musa weeps at the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH. He kneels longer than protocol demands. When he rises, he doesn't look back. And then, at last, Mecca, there are no trumpets, no fireworks, just the soft murmur of thousands of pilgrims moving as one. The Kaaba rises in the center of the Grand Mosque like a black heartbeat. It is not decorated. It does not need to be. You stand at Musa's side, watching him approach, and for the first time, you understand why he came. This is not about being a king. It's about being small. He circles the Kaaba in his white pilgrim's robe, indistinguishable from the rest. The guards don't follow. The musicians fall silent. The gold is left behind. It is just one man, one soul, orbiting the heart of his belief. And something shifts in you too. The noise of history quiets. The world shrinks to the sound of sandals on stone. The journey outward becomes a journey inward. And then, almost as soon as it arrived, the moment passes. Musa completes the Hajj. He prays. He fasts. He reflects. And when he turns to leave Mecca, he is not lighter, but fuller. Not broken down, but reassembled. Tighter, wiser, quieter. The return trip begins. But this is not a rewind. The route back is never the same as the way there. You don't retrace steps. You redraw them. Musa makes stops across the Islamic world, meeting scholars, poets, architects. He carries home not just gold and stories, but people. He hires the best minds he can find. Men who dream in geometry, who write in flowing Arabic, who speak of stars and law and logic. There's one architect in particular, a quiet Andalusian man named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. Musa offers him a place not just at court, but in Mali's future. Al-Sahili accepts. He doesn't ask how much he'll be paid. He just smiles and says, "What do you want me to build?" Musa replies, "Everything." You ride back through Cairo again. The city remembers you. Merchants still grumble about the economic chaos you left in your golden wake. Musa, embarrassed by the disruption, quietly borrows back some of the gold. Yes, borrows back from the markets, attempting to stabilize prices. It's a rare moment of political humility. The gesture doesn't fix everything, but it shows the world something important. This is not a reckless king. This is a king who learns. By the time you reach Mali's southern borders, the air is thick with anticipation. Word is spread. The king is returning. Not just any king, but Mansa Musa, the golden pilgrim, the giver of alms, the man who bowed to no one but God and shook Cairo's economy without drawing a sword. And when you enter Niani, the city doesn't greet you with fanfare. It erupts. Trumpets, drums, ululations, parades. Children climb rooftops just to catch a glimpse. Elders weep. Nobles bow. The city's walls seem to pulse with joy. And Musa, he raises his hand, not to wave, but to quiet the crowd. He steps forward, robes trailing, eyes focused, and announces something unexpected. We're going to build. And oh, how they build. First, mosques. Not just one or two, but dozens. In Niani, in Gao, in Timbuktu. Yes, Timbuktu. That shimmering syllable of a city, tucked near the Niger River like a secret whispered into the bend of stream. At the time, it's little more than a trading outpost. But Musa sees what others miss. He doesn't just want a city of merchants. He wants a city of minds. So he builds a university. He doesn't call it university. Not yet. But that's what it becomes. The Sankor Madrasa, with its libraries of thousands of manuscripts. Math, medicine, theology, astronomy. Students come from across Africa and the Islamic world. They study not for gold, but for truth. And what starts as one small school grows into a full intellectual hub. At its peak, Timbuktu holds more written knowledge than most European cities. You walk among the scholars, and it's not quiet. It's alive. Heated debates in Arabic echoed down clay corridors. Dust motes dance in sunbeams between bookshelves. A boy with ink-stained fingers argues about algebra with a man old enough to be his grandfather. This, you realize, is what Mansa Musa really brought back from Mecca, a vision. And vision, unlike gold, cannot be spent. It multiplies. Soon, architects are transforming Mali's skyline. Al-Sahili designs buildings with clean lines, graceful curves, and courtyards that breathe. They use mud. Yes, mud, but not the sloppy kind. Carefully shaped, sun-baked, adorned with wooden beams and intricate carvings. It is architecture that belongs to the land, that listens to the wind. Even governance changes. Musa doesn't reinvent the system, but he refines it. He strengthens the Qadi system, Islamic judges who oversee disputes using Sharia law. Justice becomes a formal pillar, not a favor granted by nobles. Musa listens to cases. He respects precedent. He becomes known not just as a powerful king, but a fair one. And yet, he never stops being human. You catch glimpses. A private laugh with his daughter. A frown when a village suffers drought. A sigh when he hears the distant drums of war beyond Mali's borders. Musa is no longer the curious boy you first met in the market. He is heavier now, not in weight, but in presence. He carries history, and history doesn't always wait its turn. In the years following Musa's return, the world begins to notice Mali. Maps change. European cartographers start sketching a crowned figure sitting on a golden throne in West Africa. Mansa Musa, holding a nugget the size of a pear. He becomes a myth in real time. Traders head toward Mali, not just for gold, but for reputation. Diplomats send letters. Poets write verses. You realize something strange. Sometimes a single journey doesn't just mark history. It rewrites it. But Musa doesn't bask in glory. He continues to build, to give, to pray. And one quiet morning, many years later, he walks out onto the roof of his palace. The sun is just beginning to rise. Birds call lazily across the river. The city breathes. You step beside him. He doesn't speak. You don't either. Because sometimes, words aren't big enough. You're watching the king who changed the world by walking through it with open hands and a full heart. You're standing beside a man who reminded his people and the planet that power is not in conquest, but in character. And as the sun rises, you understand the strange, beautiful truth at the center of it all. Mansa Musa didn't take the world by force. He invited it, and the world, stunned and blinking, walked in. History doesn't clap when a man dies. It whispers. And when Mansa Musa's whisper finally comes, it drifts not through palaces or markets, but through quiet corridors, between prayer beads and lost scrolls, between minaret shadows and ancient baobab trees. No one is quite sure the exact date. Some say it was 1332. Others whisper it might have been 1337. No matter. What matters is what he left behind. You are there, in the dim chamber, watching the final flickers of his breath. He is surrounded by those who love him. Family, scholars, servants, children with wide, wet eyes. There is no wailing, just the slow rhythm of whispered duas. Mansa Musa, the richest man in history, is dying in a simple cotton robe. No crown, no gold, just silence. And yet, what a noise his life made. When he dies, the world tilts slightly. Mali is not leaderless. His son Maga takes the throne, but it is suddenly fatherless. The old lion is gone, and in his absence, the kingdom begins to feel his shape more than ever. And so do you. You walk the streets of Niani. People still greet you with warm hands, but their eyes search for something no longer there. Gold glitters the same, the mosques stand tall, the university doors are still open, but it all feels quieter. But here's the truth you come to learn. Legacies do not disappear. They echo. They echo in the dust kicked up by couriers delivering letters between cities Musa-linked. They echo in the quills of scholars copying Qurans in Timbuktu, page after page, by lamplight. They echo in the arches of mosques shaped by al-Sahili's mind, still sheltering the faithful. They echo in children learning Arabic, astronomy, logic, and law in courtyards built from mud but rich with meaning. In the years after Musa's death, Mali continues to flourish for a time. Trade grows. Timbuktu gains fame not just as a trading town, but a citadel of intellect. Salt caravans march south from Gaza, their camels loaded like floating ships. Gold flows north. Ivory, cola nuts, manuscripts, all dance between borders on routes that Musa once walked himself. And then the visitors come, not just traders or scholars, but explorers. Ibn Battuta, the Moroccan traveler whose footsteps span continents, arrives in Mali a few years after Musa's death. He finds a kingdom still humming with order, justice, and respect for Islam. He writes of the people's honesty, of their modesty, of their fierce commitment to prayer and education. But even he notices it, the gap Musa left behind. Without the architect of vision, cracks begin to form. They are small, almost invisible at first. A tax gone missing, a merchant wronged, a war not wisely avoided. Musa's son rules, but he is no Musa. He inherits a golden empire, but not the golden wisdom to wield it. And the world changes. New empires rise along the Nile and in the sands of North Africa. Europe, once fragmented and faltering, begins to stir. The printing press is a few centuries away. So are ships that will cut through oceans instead of deserts. But you can already feel the future coming. A future where kingdoms like Mali must not only be rich, but resilient. The wealth Musa generated does not vanish overnight, but the stewardship of that wealth begins to falter. By the late 14th century, internal strife starts to tug at the seams of the empire. Provinces squabble. Local rulers gain more power. The center weakens. External threats, Tuareg raiders, Mossi cavalry, Songhai ambition, creep closer. Mali is still grand, still feared, still revered, but the balance is tipping. And yet, you stay. Why? Because even as the empire shifts, something deeper remains. Something Musa planted not in the soil, but in the soul of Mali. You begin teaching in Timbuktu. Just a small class, history, ethics, hadith studies. You quote Musa not as a legend, but as a man you knew. Students don't believe you at first. One girl even laughs. Mansa Musa? You mean the man made of gold? The man on the map? You nod. Yes. But he was also a man who wept in Medina. A man who walked barefoot around the Kaaba. A man who stayed up at night worrying about wheat prices in Gao. Their eyes widen. You see it then. The same thing Musa saw on that long walk to Mecca. Transformation begins with belief. Timbuktu's libraries swell. Some say 700,000 manuscripts. Others say more. Doesn't matter. What matters is that knowledge is preserved. Words copied again and again like sacred seeds. While Europe drowns in its dark ages, Mali glows. Students from Senegal, Nigeria, Morocco, even distant Persia arrive. And always, Musa's name is whispered. Not shouted, not chanted. Whispered, like a prayer. You begin to realize something odd. People outside Africa start to take notice. A Spanish cartographer named Abraham Cresques draws a map, the Catalan Atlas, and on it, smack in the middle of West Africa, sits a black man with a golden crown, holding a nugget the size of a lemon. Mansa Musa, the map says, the richest king in the world. And there it is. He has entered the world's imagination. You laugh when you first see the map, because it's both true and not. The gold is there, yes. The crown is there, yes. But the real Musa? He wouldn't be holding a nugget. He'd be holding a book. He'd be pointing at a school, a mosque, a market where just law was passed. But history remembers what it wants. And what the world wants is a golden king. And yet, you're not angry. Because you know the real legacy isn't in the maps. It's in the young man who memorized the Quran because Musa paid his teacher. It's in the grandmother who found justice in a Qadi's court. It's in the dusty shelves of Sankor, where a boy from Bornu reads Aristotle translated through Arabic under a flickering oil lamp. And you? You become an old man. Not wealthy, not powerful, but full of memories, of deserts and drums, of prayer rugs and scholars, of the boy who once served the man who became the king who built an empire of books in a world made of salt and gold. You write down what you remember, in Arabic, in Monday, sometimes just in symbols for your students to decipher. You do not care if your name is remembered, but you want us to be. And centuries later, long after the empire fades, long after the sands reclaim cities, long after the books are buried and dug up again, someone will ask, who was Mansa Musa? And someone like you, maybe a teacher, maybe a storyteller, maybe just a father at a fire, will answer, he was not just the richest man in history. He was the man who knew what wealth was for. To build, to educate, to worship, to lift. And maybe, just maybe, when the wind is right and the stars are watching, that whisper will rise again. Not as history, but as hope. There's something oddly enchanting about deserts at dawn. You're standing at the edge of the Sahara, your feet buried in golden sand that's still cool from the night. Overhead, the stars are beginning to blink out one by one, like sleepy children called back inside. And in front of you, stretching farther than your eyes can see, is the trade route. Yes, that trade route. The one that transformed Mali from a wealthy kingdom into an economic supernova. And you're gonna walk it. Kind of. Let's be honest. You wouldn't survive a full trip. Camels spitting, bandits lurking, sun baking your brain like an egg on a skillet. But we'll pretend, just this once, that you're tougher than you look. Because to understand Mansa Musa's power, you have to understand his roads. He didn't just inherit Mali's trade routes. He revolutionized them. Before Musa, trade had already connected West Africa with the Islamic world. Caravans crossed the Sahara, braving thirst, bandits, and long silences. In return, cities like Niani and Gao thrived. But Musa? He turned the trickle into a flood. You begin your walk heading north toward the salt mines of Tagaza. The air here tastes like dust and minerals. Miles before you reach the mines, you see it. Glimmering white slabs stacked like bricks, piled into crude forts. Salt. That's right, salt, the boring table stuff. But in 14th century Mali, it was nearly as valuable as gold. Workers here, mostly enslaved laborers, harsh truth, cut the salt into thick plates and load them onto camels. Each beast carries hundreds of pounds, plodding toward trade cities under the whip of hot wind. Some historians debate whether Musa reformed conditions in the mines. Others believe he let the harsh status quo persist. The truth, as usual, is murky. Still, salt made Musa's empire. It was traded ounce for ounce with gold, sometimes quite literally. People in the forest zones craved it, needed it. You can go weeks without gold. Try going 3 days without salt and see what happens to your brain chemistry. Spoiler, it's not good. So the caravans roll. Through the desert they march, heading south to cities like Walata and Timbuktu. These aren't just dusty outposts. They're hubs. Think of them as the FedEx sorting centers of the ancient world. Caravans stop, trade, refresh, and continue. Musa ensures these cities are safe, law-abiding, and profitable. Merchants want stability. Musa gives them a red carpet. And speaking of carpets, let's talk about imports. Silks, ceramics, fine paper, Chinese spices, Arabian horses. All of it made its way into Musa's Mali. The empire wasn't some isolated hut in the bush. It was cosmopolitan, multilingual, and plugged in. Thanks to Musa, Mali could flex its wealth globally and back it up with infrastructure. You stop in the city of Gao. It's vibrant, chaotic, colorful. The Niger River bends lazily beside the city like it's stretching its arms. Boats ferry goods, children splash, and vendors shout in Songhai, Mande, and Arabic. You spot a Quran seller on a straw mat, his goods bound in leather, faded but rich with wisdom. Musa visited this city many times. He encouraged its growth, its trade, and yes, its religion. Because don't forget, commerce wasn't his only export. Islam was booming. Not the forced kind. Not the sword-on-your-neck kind. No, Musa made Islam appealing. He built mosques at every key city, appointed respected scholars as judges, qadis, and opened madrasas where children from all castes could learn to read and memorize the Quran. Some argue whether this Islamization came at the cost of older spiritual traditions, animism, ancestor worship, griot storytelling. Others think the two coexisted more than we give credit for. Either way, it's clear, religion walked hand in hand with trade. And you begin to see why this was Musa's genius. He understood something many kings never do. Wealth is wasted if it doesn't flow. Flow into cities. Flow into people's hands. Flow into books, into laws, into dreams. So when he marched across the desert during his famous Hajj, it wasn't just for religion. It was a flex, a signal to the world. Every merchant in Cairo, every scholar in Mecca, every scribe in Andalusia, they all saw a black emperor who commanded economies. And here's the kicker. Even after the Hajj, Musa didn't stop building. He expanded markets, reinforced trade laws, protected caravans. He even standardized gold weights. Probably after that, oops, we crashed Cairo's economy incident. We'll pretend it was a teachable moment. As you continue your journey, you cross paths with dozens of traders. One from Africa, selling embroidered tunics. Another from Morocco, hawking glazed pottery. One even claims to be from China, though you think he's just from Fez and trying to impress customers. And what binds them all? The Musa-formed network. Safe roads, honest courts, predictable taxes. Sure, there's still some bribes here and there. This is medieval trade, not a Disney movie, but compared to the chaos elsewhere, Mali was smooth. You stop to rest in a caravanserai, your muscles sore and your sandals full of sand. Around you, fires crackle. Merchant trade stories, not just goods. One man speaks of a gold mine near Beret. Another boasts he sold 3 camels for a single ivory tusk. A boy recites poetry he learned from a traveling cleric. You sit back and realize something. This isn't just economics. This is culture, and it's spreading like wildfire. When Musa's name comes up in the conversation, because of course it does, everyone has a story. I saw him in Timbuktu, one claims. He gave away so much gold it turned the sand yellow, says another. He fasted through Ramadan in the desert, someone whispers in reverence. And you, just listening, smile, because you know the truth. He didn't just build roads. He built routes to imagination. He made Mali a myth, even while it was still real. But remember, history doesn't pause to admire greatness. While trade soars, so do tensions. Songhai, once a vassal state, begins to grow restless. You hear rumors in the market. Their king's got ideas. They want the river. They think we're soft now. Soft? You scoff. But the truth is, Mali's golden era is balancing on a razor. Still, for now, it holds. And so you keep walking. Past caravans, past chants, past the long line of camels silhouetted against the purple dawn. You walk the roads Musa made safe. You sleep in inns Musa made clean. You pray in mosques Musa paid for. And every step you take, you feel it. The pulse of an empire built on movement. An empire that traded not just goods, but ideas. Not just salt, but safety. Not just gold, but glory. And somewhere out there, in the glowing horizon of the Sahara, you imagine Musa's ghost still walking, barefoot, robes fluttering, eyes forward. Not toward the past, but always toward the next city. You're sweating, and not just from the sun, though let's be clear, it's unforgiving. Your robes are sticking to your back like wet laundry. The heat off the desert stones is rising in visible ripples. But what really makes you sweat is what you're looking at. Gold. More gold than you've ever seen in your life. Not stacked in neat piles or hidden in dusty vaults, no. This gold moves. It breathes. It marches. And leading it all is the man himself, Mansa Musa. You made it. After months of prep, whispers and caravanserais, and too many dates for dinner to count, you're now watching the single most extravagant royal procession West Africa has ever sent across the desert. The year? Around 1324. The destination? Mecca. The mission? A Hajj, but also a message. And that message is loud. Let's break it down. Musa isn't making this pilgrimage like your average worshiper in a dusty robe with a prayer mat tucked under his arm. Oh no, this is royal theater. You count tens of thousands of people. Musa reportedly brings 60,000 men with him. That includes attendants, soldiers, officials, griots, servants, scholars, and, yes, a whole squad of drummers. You think you even hear a horn section warming up. The man does not travel light. Behind them, 500 heralds march in formation. Each carries a golden staff, because why not let the sunlight reflect your wealth like a disco ball? Then come the camels, hundreds of them, and each one loaded with 300 pounds of gold dust. Not gold bars, not coins, just finely ground, shimmering gold particles that literally blow into the air when the wind picks up. You sneeze and briefly wonder if it's allergy season or just airborne wealth. And in the center of it all, Musa, you see him riding on horseback. Some say he used a camel. Others say he alternated, because when you're that rich, who's counting? His robes are made of the finest Egyptian cotton, dyed indigo, so deep it looks like twilight wrapped around his body. His turban? Immaculate. His gaze? Forward. Focused. Like a man walking not just across sand, but across history. And here's the part that makes this pilgrimage legendary. He doesn't just pass through places. He rewrites them. In every city, he gives. In Wallata and Tuat, he distributes gifts to the poor, gold to the scholars, and donations to mosques. His generosity becomes too generous. Historians still argue whether Musa was being sincerely devout or slyly political. Maybe both. Because every coin he gives out whispers his name. Every mosque stone he funds cements his empire's piety and power. You enter Cairo next, and it's chaos in the best possible way. The city is already bustling, merchants shouting in Arabic, donkeys braying, perfume thick in the air. But when Musa arrives, it's as if someone tilted the chessboard. Prices jump, markets swell. The Sultan of Egypt is confused, intrigued, and a little irritated. He wants to meet Musa, but Musa refuses. Not out of arrogance, but protocol. You see, Musa's belief system states that he, a devout Muslim, should only bow to God, not to another king, even a sultan. Eventually, they meet. After some diplomatic foot shuffling, Musa agrees to the audience. The sultan expects a man clothed in pride. Instead, Musa bows respectfully, without prostrating. And the sultan? He's charmed. That's Mansa Musa for you. A man who can bend without breaking. And then comes the part Cairo remembers for centuries. Musa spends so much gold in Cairo, gifts, donations, and likely some retail therapy, that he causes a massive economic disruption. Gold becomes too common. Its value drops. Inflation kicks in. Imagine that. Crashing a country's economy just by shopping. And here's the twist. He tries to fix it. On his way back through Egypt, Musa reportedly borrows gold at high interest to remove some of the excess currency and stabilize the market. Historians still argue whether this was economic savvy or damage control. Either way, it's one of the only times in recorded history where someone got a gold hangover. From Cairo, you continue to Mecca. This part of the journey is quieter, holier. Pilgrims chant. Dust lifts from your sandals. You pass date palms, desert wells, and fields of wild wheat. The sun rises each day like a shimmering orange coin and sets like a promise. Musa finally reaches the holy city. There's no gold fanfare here, no camels shimmering with wealth, just faith. He performs the rites of Hajj with humility, circling the Kaaba, praying with the masses, standing on Mount Arafat at dawn. For all his power, he is now a servant of God, equal among millions. And this is where Musa transforms from legend to icon. Because while others make the pilgrimage and return with stories, Musa returns with something else. A vision. You hear him whispering to his advisors by the campfire. We will build cities, he says. He talks of Timbuktu and Gao. Yes, but also of new institutions. Schools, libraries, learning centers. He's tasted the world of Islamic scholarship in Mecca and Cairo, and he wants Mali to shine just as brightly. So when you begin the long return journey, it feels different. Sure, the caravan is lighter. Musa gave away more gold than most kingdoms even own, but the purpose is heavier. You return with architects, with scholars, with manuscripts written in perfect Arabic calligraphy, full of philosophy, science, law, and stories. These aren't souvenirs. They're seeds. And Musa, he's already plotting where to plant them. Back across the Sahara, the procession looks like something from myth. Desert winds carry the sound of drums. Merchants gather just to watch. Children whisper stories. And you? You walk behind Musa, marveling at the trail he leaves. Not footprints in the sand, but ideas. Reputations. Possibilities. He didn't go on Hajj to find faith. He went to fuse it into his empire, his people, and the very bones of West Africa. And now you see it. This wasn't just the journey of a man. It was the birth of a legend. You're tired. Not the kind of tired that a nap will fix. This is desert tired. Bone deep, sand stuck between your teeth tired. The kind that follows you across borders and seeps into your dreams. But still you press on, because you're not just following any ruler. You're walking in the wake of Mansa Musa, King of Kings, shadow caster across empires. And he's not done yet. Far from it. You're back in Mali now. The journey to Mecca is behind you. The gold, the Cairo chaos, the sacred silence of Arafat, all logged into memory. But if you thought that was the peak of Musa's story, think again. Now the building begins. You reach the edge of Timbuktu, just as the dust settles from the caravan. And what you see is potential. A dusty trading outpost. A few structures. Some clay homes squinting at the sun like sleepy cats. But Musa? He sees more. He always does. He doesn't see a village. He sees a beacon. A city of knowledge. A hub for scholars, poets, astronomers, and architects. A West African Alexandria. And so, he does what only someone with an empire's budget and Mecca's inspiration can do. He starts building. First come the mosques, grand, sun-baked structures made with local materials, but with vision imported straight from Cairo. You can smell the wet earth being shaped into bricks. Feel the sweat of workers hauling beams. The main event, the Jingareba Mosque, designed by an architect from Cairo. Yes, one Musa brought back from Hajj. This mosque becomes an anchor for the city's transformation. It stretches across the sand like a stone poem, with wooden beams poking from its flanks to support mud plaster during the rainy season. The call to prayer sounds from its minaret, echoing like soft thunder across the dunes. Quirky tidbit. The mosque's maintenance ritual includes smearing fresh mud across its surface every year. Yep, entire communities pitch in. It's basically an ancient architectural spa day. But Musa doesn't stop at mosques. He wants minds to match the grandeur. So next up, schools, libraries, scriptoriums. In Timbuktu, he founds what would later evolve into the Sankore University, an institution that becomes a magnet for thinkers from across the Islamic world. It starts humbly, a mosque with a small learning circle. But under Musa's patronage, it blossoms. Soon, you're surrounded by students copying manuscripts, their fingers stained with ink, their eyes bright with ideas. They study theology, astronomy, law, grammar, and even medicine. These aren't just reciters, they're thinkers, challengers, writers of new ideas on old parchment. And guess what? They're writing in Arabic. Which means Mali isn't just connected to local trade routes anymore. It's intellectually tied to Baghdad, Cairo, Granada, even Persia. You've become a node in a vast web of scholarship, all thanks to a king who saw books as treasure equal to gold. And while all this unfolds, Musa doesn't just rule. He restructures. You overhear meetings in the palace. He's implementing new systems, reorganizing provinces, appointing trustworthy governors, standardizing tax collection. Think of it as a medieval administrative update, one that's surprisingly efficient. He even increases diplomatic relations with Morocco and Egypt. But here's where it gets juicy. Historians still argue whether Musa's emphasis on Islamic law clashed with indigenous traditions. Did he respect the spiritual customs of his people, or did he slowly edge them out in favor of Islamic orthodoxy? The evidence is foggy. You do notice that griots, the traditional storytellers and keepers of oral history, still perform. They chant the tales of Sunyata Keita, of ancestors and forest spirits. And Musa? He listens, sometimes with a furrowed brow, sometimes with a subtle smile. He knows that identity is layered. You can build minarets and remember the gods of the river. And remember, you're not the only one watching this unfold. Word of Mali's gold and scholarship is leaking across continents like a sunrise. European cartographers, let's be honest, usually draw Africa as a vague chunk labeled, "Here be lions." Start sketching Mali with actual detail. One of the most famous examples? The Catalan Atlas of 1375, created by a Majorcan Jewish mapmaker. There, sitting on a golden throne, is Mansa Musa himself, crowned, robed, holding a nugget of gold like it's a snack. Sure, the map's not perfect. Musa's skin tone is a little off. And the geography? Let's just say nobody's using it for directions. But still, he's there. A West African king featured in a European atlas. That's prestige. Meanwhile, Timbuktu grows. You feel it in the streets. Merchants hawk wares from as far as the Levant. Students quote Aristotle and Al-Ghazali in the same breath. The air hums with poetry, theory, and the soft shuffle of sandals on stone. You sit in a public square and listen to a debate on the moon's influence over tides. Someone swears it's magic. Another counters with lunar gravitation, even if they don't quite call it that. You sip a sweet tea and think, this feels like the future. And guess what? It kind of is. Because under Musa, Mali isn't just powerful, it's cosmopolitan. You remember how he brought architects, scholars, and calligraphers back from his pilgrimage? Now, they're woven into the empire's DNA. You hear Spanish Arabic in one corner, Berber in another, Mande dialects echoing from stalls. Mali becomes a melting pot, where knowledge, culture, and commerce converge. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. You hear whispers from jealous neighbors. Other kingdoms in West Africa, like the Songhai, look on with wary eyes. And within Mali, some nobles grumble. They say Musa gives too much attention to Timbuktu, that he's stretching the treasury thin. But Musa, he plays the long game. He knows that legacy isn't about pleasing every noble. It's about planting trees that shade future generations. And speaking of trees, let's not forget the agriculture boom. Musa invests in irrigation, expands farming systems, encourages the growth of crops like millet, rice, and sorghum. Because knowledge doesn't mean much on an empty stomach. One afternoon, you visit a village where children recite verses from both the Quran and tales of their ancestors. A scholar teaches astronomy using clay pots to represent planets. A woman sings a praise song for Musa while grinding flour. And in that moment, you get it. This isn't just the aftermath of a pilgrimage. It's a renaissance. You think back to the man you followed across the desert, the one with gold camels and royal drummers, and realize he wasn't showing off. He was laying the groundwork. For ideas. For cities. For memory. And here's the quirky twist of the day. Musa was so generous with his gold during that pilgrimage that even 100 years later, Cairo's economy was still recovering. That's not just influence. That's aftershock. So, you sit back, listen to the evening call to prayer rise above Timbuktu's rooftops, and realize you're witnessing the transformation of a kingdom. From gold to greatness. From myth to manuscript. And the best part, it's not over yet. Because for Mansa Musa, the return home isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of his legacy. It's late now. The sun dips behind the Sahel, painting the sky in streaks of orange, purple, and ancient gold. You sit on the palace steps in Niani, capital of the Mali Empire, listening to the breeze whisper through the royal trees. And you wonder, what happens when a legend grows old? Because Mansa Musa, the richest man in history, the devout pilgrim, the builder of Timbuktu, is aging. His beard has silver streaks now. His gait is slower. The jeweled cane he once carried as a symbol of command now helps him walk. But don't mistake this for weakness. Even in old age, Musa rules with precision. His court still thrums with life. Ambassadors from Morocco, Egypt, and the distant lands of the Ottomans arrive, bearing gifts and letters. Scholars still debate the finer points of astronomy and theology in the palace courtyard. Traders unload goods from camels. Ivory, salt, cola nuts, even Chinese silk brought through indirect routes. But behind the palace walls, the king begins thinking less about gold and more about time. Time, Musa realizes, is the one currency even emperors can't hoard. And so, he begins preparing for the one journey no one escapes. No, not another pilgrimage. Something bigger. Something eternal. Legacy. You see it happening quietly. Musa calls his scribes and advisors. He begins to document his reign, not just in numbers and trade, but in memory. He invites griots, the royal storytellers, to record his life in oral epic. These aren't boring bullet points of policy. These are living tapestries of tale, of desert storms, sacred prayers, political battles, and dreams. At night, you listen to them perform around the fire. Their voices rise like drums, echoing through the court. He who made gold walk, made stone speak, made books fly like birds across Timbuktu's sky. The children clap, the elders nod. You listen, you remember. And in private, Musa thinks of his people. He walks through the villages. Yes, walks, greeting elders, visiting mosques, and checking on irrigation channels. Sometimes he teaches a verse from the Quran to wide-eyed boys. Other times he just sits quietly by a well, watching farmers carry buckets. He wants to see what he built. He wants to know if Mali will remember. But of course, he's a king, and even in these reflective moments, questions of succession rise. Who will follow Mansa Musa? He has many sons, many nephews. Advisors whisper. Nobles take sides. The air grows tense. But Musa doesn't rush. He tests them, sends them on missions, asks difficult questions, watches how they treat the poor, how they pray, how they handle conflict. A crown, he knows, is more than gold. It's the weight of wisdom and will. Eventually, he chooses a successor, Magan Musa, his son, young, educated, and raised in the shadow of greatness. Will he be as wise, as brave, as generous? Only time will tell. And time, as always, moves forward. One morning, the sky feels strange, heavy. The birds fly low. The musicians play quieter songs. The servants move with slower steps. Because inside the palace, Mansa Musa is saying goodbye. It's not dramatic. There's no thunder, no plague, no betrayal. Just a quiet slipping into sleep. A man who walked across continents now walks into eternity. You sit with the others in the palace garden. The call to prayer rises. The scholars gather. The people begin mourning. But not with despair, with pride, because they know they live during the reign of Musa the Great, King of Mali, Lion of the Desert, the builder of Timbuktu, the bringer of books and justice, the Hajj-goer who flooded Cairo with gold and hearts with awe. You walk through the city after his passing. On walls, his name is painted in calligraphy. In markets, people whisper stories of his pilgrimage. In mosques, they recite his favorite verses. And in homes, families tell their children. There once lived a king whose generosity made gold lose value, whose faith carried him across the sand, and whose love for knowledge built a city that lit the world. Timbuktu, once a dusty trading post, now thrives. Scholars continue to pour in. Manuscripts multiply. Debates rage in courtyards. 1,000 years later, historians will still marvel at its libraries. And Musa's work, it survives, not just in bricks and gold, but in ideas. His reign inspires future African rulers. His pilgrimage sets a template for royal devotion. His administration becomes a case study in pre-modern statecraft. And maybe the best twist of all, centuries later, long after Musa's name faded in European textbooks, historians and economists would rediscover him. Using inflation-adjusted calculations, they'd realize that Mansa Musa may have been the richest human being in all recorded history. Yes, richer than Bezos, then Rockefeller, then emperors of Rome and sultans of India. But what he left behind was more than wealth. He left a golden age. Now the fire dims, the story ends, but you're still sitting under the stars, thinking about how a king's legacy isn't measured in coins or conquest, but in how he made people feel safe, seen, inspired. Mansa Musa didn't build pyramids or command war elephants. He didn't conquer Rome or ride stormy seas. He built schools. He shared books. He walked thousands of miles to pray. And he showed the world that the heart of Africa wasn't just wild jungles or savage myths, as outsiders believed. It was empire, intellect, and honor. So tonight, as you drift into dreams, think of gold that fell like rain, of minarets rising from red dust, of caravans stretching like rivers across the desert, and of a king who proved that true greatness begins not with a crown, but with a vision. Good night. You wake to wind. It rustles through the trees outside the walls of Timbuktu, stirs the sand beneath your feet, and carries with it something strange. Names. Musa, Emir of Mali, King of Gold. But these aren't voices of the griots, or whispers from courtiers in Niani. These names are coming from far away, from castles in Portugal, from abbeys in Spain, from merchant halls in Genoa, Pisa, and Venice. The world is starting to talk about Mali, and it's talking about you-know-who. It starts, as many things do in medieval Europe, with rumors. Whispers pass from sailor to sailor. There's a king across the Sahara, they say. A black king, richer than any Christian emperor, richer than even the Pope. How rich? Well, they say if you stretched his gold out in a line, it would reach from the Atlantic Ocean to the moon. Someone even claims his horse wears a saddle made of woven emeralds. Okay, sure, that last part might be a stretch, but you get the idea. Mansa Musa's legend is growing, and fast. You're not in Niani anymore. You're watching this from across the sea, standing in a candle-lit room in a monastery in Majorca. A monk leans over a huge sheet of parchment, sketching lines and curves with ink-stained fingers. He's drawing something that will change the way Europeans see the world forever. A map. This isn't a Google map with street views and blue dot navigation. No, this is the Catalan Atlas, one of the most important medieval maps ever made. And guess what? Right there, plopped in the middle of a giant golden desert, sits a tiny illustrated figure. It's Mansa Musa, crown on his head, scepter in hand, big smile on his face, and a glowing golden nugget between his fingers. The monk writes in Latin. This black lord is called Musa Mali. He is the richest and most noble king in all the land. You're officially famous now. But here's the twist. Musa's face on that map, it's not drawn from life. He never sat for a portrait. He didn't pose like a Renaissance duke in velvet robes. That's the power of reputation. When your deeds echo across dunes and oceans, even strangers start to paint you. They sketch your legacy into the corners of parchment. They put your name in European navigation charts, even though they can't find your capital on a compass. So why does this matter? Because this is how the rest of the world starts to realize something Europeans had mostly ignored or misunderstood. Africa wasn't just tribes and wilderness. It was empires. And Musa's reign was proof. You watch from a dusty harbor as a Genoese merchant prepares a new trade voyage. He unrolls the Catalan Atlas, stabs a finger at Musa's smiling portrait, and mutters something about the land of gold. He doesn't know where Mali is. He doesn't even know what language they speak. But he knows one thing. There's wealth out there, and it's real. Some scholars even say that these legends, these stories of Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, his gold giveaways, his architectural marvels, are what helped spark European exploration of West Africa. That they lay the groundwork for what would eventually become the Age of Discovery. And here's where things get complicated. Because for all the beauty of maps and stories, history doesn't always stay noble and pure. Curiosity turns to greed. Legends turn to plans. Portuguese ships begin sailing farther south. They don't always come as guests. Yes, you hear the laughter of merchants bartering for spices and ivory, but you also hear the clank of chains being loaded onto boats. The Mali Empire is strong, but the coastlines to the south are growing vulnerable. Soon, the era of peaceful trade gives way to darker tides, colonialism, exploitation, and slavery. And that gold Musa carried with pride? It becomes a magnet, a dangerous one. Historians still argue whether Mansa Musa's pilgrimage directly sparked this hunger for conquest, or whether it was just one dazzling chapter in a much older obsession with African resources. But one thing's certain, his fame played a role. He showed the world that Africa had something the world wanted, and the world never forgot it. Back in Mali, though, you see a different picture. Yes, foreign curiosity grows, but so does internal confidence. Scholars build more libraries. Architects design new mosques using a blend of Sudano-Sahelian and Moroccan styles. The empire's bureaucracy becomes more refined. Tax records are kept, trade networks strengthened, armies trained in peacetime drills. The Songhai are rising to the east. Minor revolts occur in outlying provinces. But for now, Musa's legacy still holds the empire steady. And in the minds of everyday Malians, Musa becomes more than a king. He becomes a symbol, like Arthur to Britain, or Caesar to Rome, or Alexander to Greece. Children hear bedtime stories that start with, "In the time of Mansa Musa." Farmers quote him when setting prices at market. Imams cite him as an example in Friday sermons. Even rebellious generals, plotting in secret, mutter his name with reverence. Because it's hard to argue with a king whose every action changed history. But here's your fun fringe fact of the night. In some stories passed down through the Sahara, Musa doesn't just walk to Mecca. He flies. Yes, really. Some griots describe his journey as supernatural, riding on the wind, or guided by stars that only kings can see. Others claim his gold came from a secret mountain gifted to him by jinn. Some versions say the rivers parted for him, like in a biblical epic. Now, are these historically accurate? Probably not. But they're beautiful, because they show how deeply Musa's story embedded itself in the spiritual and emotional life of his people. When someone is that beloved, history starts to turn them into legend, into myth, into something more. Tonight, as you lay back and close your eyes, think about that. How a man from a desert empire became a star on a map. How his name sailed to places he never visited. And how you, centuries later, are still whispering his story under the soft hum of a night breeze. Gold fades, kingdoms fall, but stories? Those last. You wake to the gentle murmur of scholars, not the usual chatter of merchants or the thunder of cavalry, but a softer, wiser sound. Pages turning, pens scratching, minds thinking. This is Timbuktu. Once just a dusty outpost on the edge of the Sahara, it now breathes with the life of 1,000 scrolls. Because of you, Mansa Musa, your pilgrimage didn't just carry gold across the desert. It carried ideas. Ideas that lit up the sandy horizon like torches. Back in your time, the city of Timbuktu was more than just a trading hub. It became the intellectual heart of West Africa. Imagine narrow streets lined with mud brick buildings whose walls hold libraries filled with manuscripts on everything from astronomy to poetry, medicine to law. This isn't your average schoolhouse with bored kids doodling in the margins. No, these libraries attract the best minds in the Islamic world, scholars traveling from Morocco, Egypt, even distant Persia, drawn like moths to a golden flame. And why? Because you invested in knowledge. Historians still argue whether the spike in scholarly activity happened because of Musa's pilgrimage, or if it was a natural bloom of Mali's wealth and stability. Either way, the link is clear. Your reign made Timbuktu a beacon. You founded or funded madrasas, Islamic schools where students studied the Quran alongside philosophy, mathematics, and grammar. One famous university, Sankore, became legendary, boasting tens of thousands of manuscripts. They say the scholars copied texts by candlelight so intensely their fingers turned black with ink stains. You can almost hear the quiet excitement as students debate Aristotelian logic in Arabic while outside. Camel caravans trudge across the sands, bringing more knowledge and trade. What's truly fascinating is how Mali scholars didn't just copy what came from the Middle East or North Africa. They innovated. They blended local traditions with Islamic learning. For example, consider Ajami, a script that uses Arabic letters to write local African languages. It's a beautiful fusion, the elegance of Arabic calligraphy meeting the rhythms and stories of the Mande people. Mansa Musa's reign didn't just export gold. It exported culture. It exported identity. You're here not just as a king, but as a catalyst for a flourishing intellectual tradition. And this legacy is far-reaching. Even today, researchers uncover ancient manuscripts from Timbuktu's hidden libraries, revealing sophisticated medical treatments, detailed legal codes, and treatises on astronomy that challenge our assumptions about medieval Africa. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some manuscripts include surprisingly modern topics, like early. You wake to the echo of a different kind of power, one that doesn't rattle swords or roar across the desert, but hums quietly beneath the surface, shaping lives and futures. It's the power of legacy. Mansa Musa's later years aren't just about gold, grandeur, or grand mosques. They're about how his empire begins to face its own future, and the world beyond its borders slowly catches up. Back in Mali, your influence is everywhere. The golden age you sparked has blossomed into a thriving civilization. Merchants in Gao and Jin trade salt, gold, and kola nuts, filling marketplaces with a heady mix of scents, spices, leather, and desert blooms. The grand mosques you built stand as symbols, not just of wealth, but of faith and unity. But power, like the desert winds, is never still. You start to notice changes, a slow shift in politics, and the shifting sands of alliances. Historians still argue whether your death was sudden or expected, whether the empire frayed quickly or held together through careful stewardship. What is certain is this: your successors inherit a complex empire. Your son, Mansa Musa, steps into your shoes with the heavy burden of expectations. He rules with determination, but even the strongest ruler can't always hold together vast territories without challenge. To the east, the Songhai kingdom grows restless, eyeing Mali's riches with ambition. To the north, shifting desert routes threaten traditional trade. And from the south, new powers stir, ready to carve their own paths. Your reign changed the world map, but the world itself is always changing. Your wealth had a side effect nobody could have predicted. Remember when your pilgrimage showered Cairo with so much gold it took years for the economy to recover? Well, in Mali, the sudden influx of wealth also made trade more complicated. Some merchants grew greedy, taxing caravans too heavily or cutting corners. Others challenged your central authority, trying to carve out power in far-flung provinces. Yet, even amid these troubles, your legacy endured in unexpected ways. One of the most fascinating impacts was on architecture. The mosques you commissioned were not just places of worship, they were statements. Crafted from sun-dried mud bricks, wooden beams, and towering minarets, structures like Jingariber and Sankor are still standing today, reminding the world of Mali's golden past. The unique Sudano-Sahelian style, blending Islamic influences with local techniques, inspired generations of builders across West Africa. In a way, your reign turned Timbuktu into an architectural jewel, a city that embodies the harmony between tradition and innovation. Now, here's a fun fringe fact for you. Some local legends claim that you had a secret chamber beneath the palace, filled with gold so pure it shimmered even in the dark. The story goes that only you and your closest advisors knew the exact location, and that the gold was so sacred it could grant wisdom to anyone who touched it. Historians are skeptical about this tale, but it captures the imagination because it symbolizes the mystery and majesty surrounding your reign. On the international stage, your pilgrimage also helped reshape the way Africa was viewed by the outside world. European maps began to include your empire with increasing accuracy. Scholars debated whether Mali's riches rivaled those of Constantinople or Cairo. Merchants sought new routes to tap into your wealth, which, ironically, set in motion events that would one day challenge Mali's supremacy. The Portuguese explorers who followed the Saharan trade route centuries later probably never imagined the stories they had heard came from a king who once gave away so much gold it temporarily destabilized an economy. And yet, your story became a double-edged sword. Your generosity and the wealth of Mali attracted not only admirers, but also invaders. Empires rise and fall, and while your Mali thrived under your rule, after your death it faced pressures that eventually reshaped West Africa's political landscape. Still, your impact wasn't just political or economic. It was deeply cultural. Through your support for Islamic scholarship, you helped create a vibrant intellectual culture that thrived long after your reign. Timbuktu's manuscripts became treasured legacies, preserving knowledge through turbulent centuries. Even today, the rediscovery of these manuscripts sheds light on Africa's rich history and contributions to global knowledge. And finally, on a personal note, your pilgrimage set an example of faith and devotion. It was more than a journey. It was a statement about identity and unity in a diverse empire. It showed the world that wealth could be wielded with purpose, not just for power, but for faith and education. As you drift into sleep tonight, think about this. Mansa Musa wasn't just a man with gold. He was a bridge between cultures, between faiths, between continents. He was a spark in the night, lighting a path that echoes even now. You wake to a landscape that feels both familiar and strange. The vastness of the Sahara stretching endlessly. Yet beneath the sun's glare, something subtle has shifted. Mali, the empire you built, now faces the tricky aftermath of your absence. It's the age-old story of great empires. What happens after the king? Your death leaves a power vacuum that no one fills quite like you did. Your son, Mansa Musa, inherits an empire swollen with wealth but tangled in new challenges. You'd think a treasury bursting with gold would make things easy, but history's full of surprises. The wealth you amassed was both a blessing and a burden. The massive influx of gold into the economy you sparked centuries ago created ripples that turned into waves. Merchants became wary of hyperinflation, traders eyed new routes, and rival kingdoms circled like vultures. Meanwhile, internally, regional governors and warlords grew restless. Mali's vastness made it hard to govern from one capital. Historians still argue whether these internal fractures were inevitable or could have been managed with different leadership. Either way, the cracks began to show. To the east, the Songhai Kingdom, once a loyal province, flexes its muscles. Under leaders like Sunni Ali and Askia Muhammad, Songhai becomes a dominant power, eventually eclipsing Mali's influence. It's a reminder that empires don't just fall because of invasion. Sometimes they outgrow their founders. Yet, despite political fragmentation, the cultural and economic foundations you laid continued to shine. Timbuktu remained a beacon of learning and spirituality. The manuscripts you helped inspire still line the shelves of madrasas. Students and scholars debated philosophy, science, and religion, keeping the flame alive through centuries of change. But here's a quirky, lesser-known detail. Some manuscript from that era revealed debates not only on theology, but on local governance, and even early forms of economic theory. It seems your empire's intellectuals were wrestling with questions that feel surprisingly modern. Questions about wealth distribution, justice, and the role of rulers. It's as if the spirit of your reign sparked not just gold, but ideas. Ideas that keep flickering in the pages of history. Beyond Mali's borders, your story became legend. European travelers and chroniclers wrote of a king so rich he showered cities with gold, reshaping economies in his wake. Maps started to depict a kingdom richer than the fabled lands of El Dorado. Yet, this fame came with distortions. Over time, your legacy was sometimes reduced to myths of greed or exotic splendor, glossing over the sophisticated culture and governance you nurtured. Even today, scholars debate how much of the Gold King image matches the complex reality. What cannot be denied is the mark you left on the world stage. The routes you opened, the wealth you showcased, and the scholarship you fostered bridged continents and cultures. You made the Sahel a crossroads for commerce and ideas, and that legacy resonates. But like all great stories, there's a bittersweet undertone. Empires rise and fall, cities flourish and fade. Yet the ideas, the culture, the faith you championed, these endure in ways no gold can buy. As night deepens, you realize that your reign was never just about riches or power. It was about connection between people, faiths, and lands. And even as the sun sets on your empire's golden age, The light you ignited continues to glow. Faint, yes, but unmistakable. A whisper through time, inviting future generations to look beyond gold, toward the true treasures of knowledge and unity. You find yourself in the twilight of Mali's golden age, where the shimmer of gold fades, but the echoes of Mansa Musa's reign still ripple through the vast Sahelian landscape. The great empire you once ruled is no longer the uncontested titan of West Africa. Instead, it stands at a crossroads, balancing between legacy and change. The stories of your pilgrimage and generosity still resonate in the marketplaces and scholarly circles, but the political reality is far more complex. After your death, Mali's political structure begins to shift in ways both expected and surprising. Your successors inherited an empire stretched thin across deserts, rivers, and savannas, and though the gold still flows, the control over far-flung provinces weakens. This decentralization leads to increased autonomy among regional leaders. Some governors become semi-independent, while others engage in subtle power struggles, testing the limits of imperial authority. You probably wouldn't survive these court intrigues either. Imagine a chessboard where the pawns suddenly want to be queens. One fringe but fascinating detail about this period involves the role of oral historians, griots, who preserve the history and cultural memory of your reign. These griots not only sang praises of your wealth and generosity, but also served as custodians of law, tradition, and social order. Their storytelling ensured that, even as political power waned, the spiritual and cultural unity of Mali endured. Historians still argue how much influence these oral traditions had in shaping both internal cohesion and external perceptions of the empire. Economically, your empire faced new challenges. The once thriving trans-Saharan trade routes began to shift due to emerging maritime trade along the Atlantic coast. Portuguese explorers, motivated by tales of your riches, sought new passages to Africa, inadvertently setting the stage for the changing dynamics of West African commerce. The overland caravan routes you so heavily relied on gradually lost prominence, shifting economic power toward coastal cities. Yet, Mali's intellectual and cultural prominence remained undiminished for a time. Timbuktu, the jewel of your empire, continued to attract scholars, poets, and theologians from across the Islamic world. The Sankore University, which you helped elevate, became a beacon of learning that preserved not only religious texts, but also works on astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. It's worth noting a quirky fact here. Some manuscripts from this era include early treatises on economics, suggesting that Mali's scholars were ahead of their time, grappling with concepts of supply, demand, and market regulation. You might think of it as medieval Shark Tank discussions about golden trade. But it wasn't just academia that flourished. Artistic expression, architecture, and music blossomed as well. The unique Sudano-Sahelian architectural style you popularized with your mosque constructions inspired not only local builders, but also influenced neighboring regions. Your patronage of the arts created a cultural richness that gave Mali an identity beyond mere wealth. There's even a local legend, perhaps exaggerated, that your court musicians played gold-stringed instruments, producing melodies so enchanting they could calm storms. Whether or not that's true, it perfectly captures the mystique surrounding your era. Politically, the rise of the Songhai Empire to the east became Mali's greatest challenge. Once a subordinate territory, Songhai under leaders like Sunni Ali and Askia Muhammad grew into a formidable power, eventually eclipsing Mali's influence. This transition marks one of the great shifts in West African history. Some historians argue that internal weaknesses in Mali accelerated this decline, while others believe the Songhai's military and administrative innovations were the primary cause. It's a debate as lively as a Timbuktu market on Festival Day. Meanwhile, the gradual encroachment of European powers along the coast introduced new pressures. Although the Portuguese initially sought gold and trade alliances, their arrival heralded a future dominated by transatlantic trade networks, including the tragic rise of the Atlantic slave trade. Mali's inland position insulated it somewhat, but the economic and political consequences were far-reaching. It's a sobering reminder that your dazzling pilgrimage was part of a larger, complex tapestry of global interactions. Despite these shifts, the cultural and religious legacy you championed endured. Islam remained deeply woven into Mali's social fabric, and the educational institutions you bolster preserve knowledge that would influence generations. Timbuktu's manuscripts survived wars, colonization, and neglect, only to be rediscovered centuries later as invaluable treasures of African and Islamic heritage. As you lay back and close your eyes, consider this. Empires, like people, have lifespans. They rise, shine, and sometimes fade, but the impact of a truly transformative ruler doesn't vanish with political borders. The wealth you distributed, the mosques you built, the scholars you nurtured, all of these threads weave into the rich tapestry of human history. Your reign teaches us that true greatness is measured not only by gold but by the ideas, culture, and connections we leave behind. Mali's story after you is a tale of adaptation, resilience, and the enduring power of knowledge. It's a reminder that history isn't just about kings and battles, but about the ongoing journey of human civilization. And hey, if you ever feel overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of it all, just remember the secret chamber legend. Whether or not it exists, it's a beautiful symbol of the mysteries that keep history alive and inviting us to explore. You drift now into the later echoes of Mali's story, long after Mansa Musa's footsteps have faded from the sandy trails and bustling markets. The empire he forged, golden and grand, has settled into a new rhythm, one less about spectacular pilgrimages and more about the subtle pulse of culture, memory, and influence. But how exactly does such a monumental legacy ripple through time? How does a story told in the heat of the 14th century still whisper across centuries? Let's begin by picturing the city of Timbuktu centuries after your pilgrimage dazzled the world. Its markets are quieter now, the caravan routes less traveled, but the air still hums with the soft murmur of scholars and ancient libraries, poring over parchment so fragile it might crumble at a careless breath. This is the heartbeat of Mali's true treasure, the wealth of knowledge preserved in tens of thousands of manuscripts. These manuscripts are astonishing, by the way. They cover everything from Quranic exegesis to advanced mathematics, astronomy, law, and even poetry. You might find it hard to believe, but some scholars suggest these texts even include early studies on climate patterns and medicine. It's as if Mali became a knowledge ark in the desert, sheltering wisdom during turbulent times. Historians still argue whether these manuscripts were mostly for elite scholars or if their ideas somehow trickled down into everyday life. Imagine dusty scrolls packed with secrets, passed from hand to hand for generations, surviving invasions, neglect, and the harsh African sun. But what about the tangible echoes of Mansa Musa's reign? The grand mosques, the architectural feats. Those earthen walls still stand, testament to an age when Mali's skyline was marked by towering minarets and intricately carved wooden beams. The Jingareba Mosque, which you helped commission in Timbuktu, remains a centerpiece, not just a place of worship, but a symbol of Mali's Islamic identity and cultural sophistication. The design itself is a marvel. Mud bricks carefully layered and reinforced every year with communal effort, a tradition that continues even today. There's something poetic about a building that requires the constant hands of its people to remain standing, much like the legacy you left, held up by generations who believe in it. A quirky tidbit here. Oral traditions say that during your reign, there was a curious ritual involving camels crossing the Niger River to celebrate the unity of the empire. Scholars debate the accuracy, but it's a reminder of how myths and reality intertwine in the memory of great leaders. These stories, whether fully true or embellished, shape the cultural identity and communal memory of Mali. Now, let's look at the wider African and global perspectives. Your pilgrimage introduced Africa's wealth to the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern worlds, forever changing how Africa was perceived. Suddenly, West Africa was no longer a distant, mysterious land, but a center of immense wealth and culture. European maps began to reflect this new reality, even if distorted by exaggeration and myth. Fast forward a few centuries, and colonial powers would gaze at Mali's ancient wealth with envy, often dismissing or ignoring the sophistication of its society in favor of exploitative narratives. Yet, Mali's legacy endured quietly in resistance movements and cultural revival. Post-independence, West African nations look back to your reign with pride, a golden age representing political unity, economic strength, and cultural flourishing. There's also an intriguing, lesser-known thread here: the influence of your pilgrimage on Islamic art and literature far beyond Africa's borders. The lavish gifts and architectural ideas exchanged during your travels inspired artisans from Cairo to Mecca. Some historians speculate that your journey played a subtle role in spreading West African Islamic culture, enriching a broader Islamic world. It's a testament to how travel and exchange can shape civilizations. But of course, your story isn't without its shadows. The vast wealth of Mali, showcased so openly, also attracted predatory interests and internal dissent. The very gold that dazzled the world sometimes brought instability. Scholars still debate whether the influx of gold caused inflation that weakened the economy, or if it was more about political fragmentation after your reign. This tension between wealth and stability is a universal theme in history, and one that continues to echo today. As the centuries rolled on, the physical borders of Mali shifted, faded, and transformed. The Songhai Empire rose and fell. Later empires and kingdoms emerged, each carrying pieces of your legacy. The Sahel remained a crossroads of cultures, trade, and ideas, shaped by your bold vision. And here's something to muse over before sleep fully claims you. How does a single individual's journey, one man's pilgrimage, change the fate of nations? Your story reminds us that history is not just about wars and treaties, but about human actions that ripple outward in unexpected ways. A caravan laden with gold, a city filled with scholars, a mosque built with communal hands, all threads woven into the vast tapestry of time. So, as you settle deeper into the softness of your bed, consider the light you carry forward. It's a quiet glow, not as blinding as gold, but infinitely more enduring. The story of Mansa Musa is not just about riches. It's about connection, knowledge, and the enduring power of human spirit. And with that, the desert night grows still. The ancient manuscripts whisper their secrets, and the spirit of Mali's golden age rests gently beneath the stars. You arrive now at the very edge of the story, where Mali's golden age gracefully bows to the passage of time. The empire, once dazzling with gold and scholarly brilliance, now transitions into memory and legacy. And it's here, in these final moments, that the true weight of Mansa Musa's reign settles softly around you like the evening breeze across the Sahara. As you trace the contours of Mali's history, you realize that what you've witnessed isn't just a tale of wealth or conquest, but a vivid illustration of the power of vision. Your pilgrimage wasn't just a religious journey. It was a global announcement, a shimmering declaration that West Africa was a center of culture, power, and faith. The ripples of that announcement spread far beyond the limits of your empire, touching distant lands and future generations. But the story doesn't end with the fall of empires or the fading of gold. The real magic lies in the ideas and connections you seeded. The manuscripts preserved in Timbuktu, the architectural wonders built from mud and wood, the stories sung by griots around flickering fires. These are the threads that stitch the past to the present. You can almost hear the echoes of your court's laughter, the clinking of gold coins, the soft rustle of scrolls and libraries, all vibrating through time. And here's a little secret. Some of those manuscripts, hidden for centuries in private collections and ancient libraries, have only recently been rediscovered, reminding the world of Mali's extraordinary contribution to global knowledge. Scholars debate how much influence these works had on Renaissance Europe, but the possibility alone invites us to rethink the flow of history. It's humbling to imagine that the intellectual sparks from the deserts of Mali might have helped light fires in far-off lands. Your story also reminds us that history is never linear or simple. The rise and fall of empires, the flow of wealth, the spread of ideas, they are all messy, intertwined, and full of surprises. You've seen how Mali's decline was not just political, but also cultural and economic, influenced by new trade routes, foreign invasions, and shifting power dynamics. And yet, the heart of the empire, the spirit of its people and their achievements, survived. A quirky fact to tuck into your memory as you drift off. In some parts of Mali, even today, storytellers reenact your pilgrimage with great fanfare, mixing historical fact with myth and a dash of theatrical flair. It's a living tradition that keeps your journey alive, blending past and present in a celebration of identity and pride. Historians still argue whether your reign was the absolute pinnacle of Mali's glory or just one brilliant chapter in a longer saga. But from where you sit, comfortably wrapped in the quiet night, it's clear that your story, full of gold, faith, generosity, and wisdom, is timeless. So as the gentle hum of the night wraps around you, and your eyelids grow heavy, remember this. Every journey, no matter how grand or small, leaves footprints. Yours shimmer like gold dust in the sands of history, lighting the way for those who come after. Now rest easy. Let the calm desert wind lull you into dreams where caravans still travel, scholars still write, and the spirit of Mansa Musa's Mali endures, shining softly beneath the endless African sky. The story slows now, like the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows and painting the sky in gentle hues. You can feel the softness of the night settling in, the world growing quieter, as if even the stars themselves lean in to listen one last time. Mali's golden age fade from sharp focus to a warm, comforting glow, a memory not of lost grandeur, but of enduring light. The riches of gold turn into treasures of knowledge, culture, and connection, reminding you that true wealth is often invisible to the eye, but deeply felt by the heart. Your journey tonight has been long and rich, but now it's time to let it rest, to let your mind wander through the quiet corridors of history, feeling the pulse of a world both distant and close. The story of Mansa Musa invites you to hold history gently, to appreciate the delicate threads that tie us all together across time and place. So take a deep breath, feel the stillness, and let the soft whispers of the past carry you into a peaceful sleep. Tomorrow is another day, and the world, like the story, waits patiently, full of wonders yet to be discovered. Good night and sweet dreams.